Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Winters. I'm the CEO of the Virginia Statewide Community Land Trust, and I'm here with Jim Russell, the chair of the board of the VSCLT. I'd like to pass it over to Jim, who is going to say a few words.
Thanks, Michelle. We are very excited that you've all joined us today. This large turnout is surely a testament to the importance of affordable housing in communities throughout Virginia. And you'll learn a lot today about CLTs and the Virginia Statewide Community Land Trust. And one real big takeaway is I think you'll discover that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not either or, it's an and. And we look forward to seeing some of the new faces here today and follow-up conversations and welcome future discussions about how we can work in your community. And now I'm going to pass it back to Michelle, who will give an introduction to what you're going to learn today and welcome our speaker. So back to you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So today we're talking about creating partnerships for lasting affordability. We have an incredible keynote speaker, but before we get there, I want to do a little bit of introductory comments. So let's get started with a story. So I wanted to introduce to you Jasmine and her two sons. As renters, Jasmine's life was unstable, in her own words. She moved to a cheaper place anytime the rent went up, which was almost every year. And that's not uncommon for lower income renters. It can mean changing schools, leaving behind friends and neighbors. And it really puts a lot of stress on parents and children. And I know you all, as people who are interested in housing, know this story very well. But 3 years ago, Jasmine was able to purchase this home by working with our partner, Fauquier County Habitat for Humanity. She has reported that it's been a great experience. It's peaceful. In her words, the school is walking distance. The commute to work is quicker. It's easier for the kids, events, and school, and after school. So Jasmine has a great story. But an even greater story is that she will be able to pass along this gift of homeownership to a new family if and when she decides that it's time to move on. Her home is part of the Virginia Statewide Community Land Trust. We own the land underneath her home, and we lease it to her with a 99-year renewable ground lease. When she sells, she will get back any equity that she put in upfront. She'll get all the principal that she has paid down on her mortgage and even a modest amount of appreciation on the value of the home. Jasmine also takes part in managing the trust. She's a member of our Policies and Programs Committee, helping shape the rules and decisions that govern homes like hers. So I start with that story to make sure that we remember that the reason that we do this is for the people that we serve. And Jasmine is one of those people. She has a great story. So how did all this get started? Well, CLTs, community land trusts, are rooted in and born from the civil rights movement. And I think our speaker may be mentioning this more. So I will move through this fairly quickly. There's an amazing documentary that John Davis has been the producer of that tells that story. And so there's a basic definition that CLTs are nonprofit organizations with a 3-part board of directors. And CLTs can own all kinds of community assets. Today, of course, we are talking about affordable housing. And so the very basics, CLT has a process that's called homeownership in perpetuity. So a family or individual purchases a home that sits on land owned by the CLT. The price is made more affordable because the homeowner is only buying the house, not the land. The homeowners lease the land from the CLT and a long-term ground lease, typically 99 years. And just like with Jasmine's story, the homeowner builds equity and agrees to sell the home at a limited value to another lower moderate income home buyer in the future. And that is how the cycle continues on into the future. So what is VSCLT? Well, we are a nonprofit organization that partners with communities across the Commonwealth to create permanently affordable homes for low and moderate income families. We are a community land trust. Through this innovative, adaptable, and scalable approach that we have modeled ourselves on, which is rooted in the community land trust model, we empower Virginians to build lasting equity, stability, and opportunity for generations to come. We were founded in 2020 by a group of Habitat for Humanities and Habitat Virginia and partners that came together. I myself served on the initial board that started meeting in 2021. And we, as the founders of the organization and these habitat organizations, they really wanted to, they were all interested in creating a community land trust and having permanent affordability. But they knew that it was a bit of a daunting process, and they wanted to share the knowledge, expertise, and resources with each other. And then once it was done, they realized that this is something that we should share with the entire state. So it was the plan of the organization from the start to become a statewide organization to provide this community land trust as a resource for everywhere around the state that wanted to be a part of the permanent affordability model. We are one of 5 established CLTs in Virginia. The other 4, and there are more, I understand, that are being created. The others are locally based, so and we consider these groups our partners. We collaborate on things. And in fact, we have all been invested in by state partners, including Virginia Housing, who I believe we've got several folks from Virginia Housing here on the call. We really appreciate the support of Virginia Housing. But these CLTs, they're not new, and they're not unique to us. There's more than 300 CLTs and shared equity organizations around the country. Again, we're excited that our speaker today, John Davis, knows so much about all of these and can tell us more about them. So really quickly, I'll just go through these 2 slides about why we do what we do and why a CLT is so valuable for communities. To us, and most people who are involved in CLTs understand that putting money, resources, subsidy, time, and effort into affordable homeownership is a lot of work, a lot of resources, and using a permanent affordability model, it allows that initial investment to be carried on and on forever. And so it keeps that initial investment in the community and makes use of it over time. Those homes are affordable in perpetuity, so there's no expiration date like there is in typical affordable housing programs. It bridges homeownership and wealth gaps for people who would otherwise most likely continue to be renters. It can create mixed income or maintain mixed income neighborhoods as home values that are not in the CLT are uncontrolled and often escalating at rates that are unsustainable for lower income home buyers. And the stewardship programming is forever. So the CLT is there to support homeownership in the long run. But why would the buyer be interested in this? Well, this opportunity for homeownership comes at a price that is unavailable elsewhere in the market. It allows them to build equity through principal reduction and moderate price appreciation. It creates stability in their housing costs and the ability to do their own thing in their home. It provides a step on the ladder, should they desire to move on to full market homeownership, which many do. And the house can be passed down to family members so they can create a legacy for their families. And in addition to the control that they have over their homes, they have the ability, the owners can participate in the governance of the CLT through committees and boards, like I shared with Jasmine's situation. So VSCLT, we're a partnership organization. We're not a developer. We can talk more about that later. We provide flexibility. by providing a number of types of resale formulas that we work with local partners to choose and customize. And again, we're very focused on stewardship. I think we'll probably get into some of that in the Q&A. I'd like again to thank Virginia Housing, the Community Foundation of Central Blue Ridge, and all of our Habitat for Humanity founding partners for their sponsorship and support of our work. And with that, I would like to introduce John Davis. John is a city planner who is he's got a long long career of expertise in CLTs. I've known about him for decades, and I finally got to meet him in preparation for this, and I feel so privileged to be able to know him now. He is on the board of the International Center for Community Land Trusts, which he helped create in 2018. He's a partner at Burlington Associates in Community Development, which is a consulting cooperative that has assisted more than 200 CLTs in the last few decades. He also served as the housing director in a community, the community of Burlington, Vermont, under a mayor you might have heard of. His name is Bernie Sanders. He can talk about that if you ask him. He is the author of the publication that he's going to talk about today, but many others. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a list of all of his great publications up on our website, because they're great resources that they include things like the Community Land Trust Reader, and his newest is Reweaving the Tapestry of Tenure. And like I mentioned, he's also a co-producer of the documentary, The Arc of Justice, which is about the origins of the Community Land Trust movement. So you can see why we wanted John to talk to us today. So John, welcome to our webinar here, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me here today. I've been asked to talk about a publication that was released by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy at the end of last year. And the focus of our report is looking at developments, kind of the growth and development of community land trust in the United States, but particularly the relationship with units of local government. And so I want to talk about, kind of generally give you an overview of the report, and then just open it up for questions and conversation. I had a colleague years ago that used to fall asleep in a number of meetings and presentations, even once fell asleep in one of the ones I was doing. And I said, Lisa, come on, pay attention. She said, John, it takes a lot more energy to listen than to talk. So I'm going to talk for a little while, but then I'm going to try to do some listening to you, and we'll have a conversation. So I mentioned that the report was released at the very end of last year. And of course, just as we were rolling it out, the report, we had a major change in our government and disruptions in our market. So, I said, gee, this report is going to be overshadowed by some pretty major uncertainties and chaos, both at the federal level and in the global market. But it's not, in our country, it's not the whole story of government and market, because there's a very robust, active civil society, what sometimes is called the third sector. And, the third sector, civil society, is made up of any number of non-governmental, nonprofit organizations providing goods and services to our neighbors, to our communities. They are certainly going to be affected by what's going on at the federal government and in the markets. And we will be affected by that, because we are part of the third sector, Community Land Trust. And despite what's going on at the federal level and in the churning in our global markets, I think community land trusts are going to continue doing good work. But they can only do good work, I believe, in partnership with local government. Now, our work is going to be made more difficult by what's going on at the federal level and in global markets. It's going to be more difficult for cities, towns, and counties and states to do the kind of work, affordable housing work and other community development activities that we're focused on today. But I think the partnerships between community land trust and units of government below the federal level are going to continue. In fact, may even be more robust in the face of what's happening further up in government. So I want to kind of assure you that what you are doing, what we are doing, is not insignificant, despite the context of what's going on nationally. In fact, I think that the kind of work that we are doing is more important than ever. And this is going to happen in red states and in blue states, because, even in red states at the local level, mayors, county commissioners, still need to provide services. They still need to serve their constituents. And that's true for units of state government as well. So let's talk a little bit about the report itself. At the beginning of last year, we reached out to every community land trust in the United States. At that point, there were 308 that were in our database at the International Center for CLTs, because we try to track community land trusts not only in the United States, but around the world. And eventually we ended up either through conversation or a survey, connecting with 115 of the 308 community land trusts in the United States. We also made an effort to talk to public officials in many of those jurisdictions about their work, their partnership, their support of community land trusts. So we collected all of this information in the report that we published through the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. The focus of the report is on homeownership. It's on kind of one activity that community land trusts are engaged in, but it's the principal activity. So why do we focus on homeownership? Well, that really is the main activity of most community land trusts in the United States. They may do other things, they do other things, but more than 90% of all the community land trusts in the United States are engaged in providing owner-occupied housing for low and moderate income populations. The other principal reason we focused on homeownership is that really is the main reason that local governments, housing trust funds, public land banks below the federal level, of course, are partnering with community land trust. And the reason for that is pretty much that, at the local level in particular, resources are scarce. The housing problem is getting worse, but the resources that local governments have to put into affordable housing are not replaceable, right? They're scarce, they're precious. So when local governments are pouring subsidies into creating affordable housing, only to see those subsidies lost on first resale or within a few years, only to see the affordable housing they help to subsidize, help to create, disappear, you don't make much progress, right? Water doesn't rise in a leaky bucket. Now, this is not just my supposition. We actually, during the course of researching and writing this report, we reached out to CLTs, we reached out to public officials and asked, why? Why are you putting resources into supporting the activities of community land trust? And these were the top 6 reasons, ranked 1 to 6, why we were told that units of local government are supporting community land trust, their projects, their operations, their planning to get started. Now, out of those 6, there are 3 that really are focused on the production side, right? I mean, and these are, providing home ownership, constructing housing, rehabbing housing. These are the activities that, most nonprofit, well, let's say all nonprofit housing providers are engaged in, and for-profit developers as well that have a social conscience and want to be working in this space. But we were particularly interested in the fact that there were 3 other activities that CLTs are particularly good at, that local governments and CLTs themselves said, that's the reason why our city is supporting our activities. And these 3 really dovetail not with the production side of affordable housing development, but the stewardship side. In fact, those 3 pretty much coincide with what we call among CLTs the 3 faces of stewardship, where CLTs are committed to preserving the affordability of the units that have been subsidized by local government, one homeowner after another. They're also interested in making sure that the buildings themselves do not deteriorate over time. They're using durable materials, energy efficiency improvements, and they want to preserve the quality of the buildings, and they want to make sure that the tenure, the home ownership that we work so hard to create for low and moderate income people, are not lost at the first financial glitch in their lives. So, it's about the money, it's about the building, it's about the people. So most CLTs are developers. They are involved in the construction side, the rehab side. Not all, but most are. But what every CLT is involved in is stewardship, standing behind those units, standing behind those home buyers for a long, long time. As our colleague Connie Chavez used to say, we are the developer that doesn't go away. I think that is the principal value added that community land trusts uniquely bring to the proposition. And it's a principal reason that we've been told that municipal governments are interested in partnering with community land trusts, because community land trusts change the structure of ownership. They change tenure of home ownership. They also add a stewardship component where they stand behind the deal forever. And that combination of tenure and stewardship is what enables the homes that are subsidized, the homes that are created with the help of municipal governments, to last one homeowner, one home buyer after another. We characterize these relationships between CLTs and local governments that are focused on stewardship. In our report, we call them preservation partnerships. So, all right, let me give you a couple of trends that we discovered in the ways that local government is supporting community land trust. And we were able to look at a long timeline because back in 2008, the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy looked at the same kind of CLT city partnership and documented what was going on 16 years ago. So 16 years later, Lincoln is returning to this question of whether, why, how are local governments supporting community land trust. So the biggest trend that we documented in our report is many more local governments with a concern for long-term affordability in the homeownership space. That, still about half of the community land trusts that we talked to said, no, our local government is not giving a priority for long-term affordability. But compared to 2008, there was an enormous growth in the number of local governments that do have a concern for perpetuating the affordability of the homes that they help to subsidize, they help to create. We also discovered among local governments a greater awareness that if you want to preserve affordability, if you want to protect the condition of the homes, if you want to stand behind the home buyers, you can't just slap an affordability covenant on the deal and walk away. There really isn't such a thing as a self-enforcing affordability covenant. There needs to be an active steward standing behind the deal. That steward, the community land trust in this case, has a lot of things to do, right? It has to pay attention to what happens before the homes are purchased, what is going on during the occupancy, and what happens at resale. So it's a quite intense stewardship regime. Various chapters of the report document focus on different ways that cities, counties, towns, and units of local government are supporting community land trust. I'm not going to go into detail on any of these, but let me mention a few of them, starting with my rocket ship there on your screen, and that is an increasing number of cities, counties, and towns that are actually taking the initiative in helping to plan community land trust. They have to bring in other people. They have to build a broad base of support and buy-in for the model. But an interesting trend for us was the number of local governments that are kind of planting the seed, bringing people together, starting the conversation about planning a new community land trust. We spent an entire chapter looking at the question of how do community land trusts get land, particularly with the support of local government. And, there are certainly some places, some counties, some cities where the support given to a CLT is not directed particularly to the land, but many of the CLTs we talked to say, well, we could not have gotten land into our portfolio either for free or at a discounted price without working in partnership with local government. In some cases, that was land that was donated. Some cases, it was land that was conveyed from the public portfolio at a discounted price. And other times, it was just a grant to acquire the land. Now, in 18% of the cases that we looked at, they got no support to acquire the land. They had to figure it out in another way. But for the majority, in 82% of the community land trusts that we spoke to, they had received some support from municipal government in bringing the land into their portfolio in the first place. Once they got the land, they had to develop the affordable housing. So we looked at what kinds of financial support were community land trust receiving from local governments. Now, a third of the cases, the grants or the loans from local government went to the home buyer, right? And, in all the other cases, 2/3 of the cases, the grants or the loans were going directly to the community land trust to build or rehab the housing. They then turned around and sold the housing at a discounted price to a lower moderate income home buyer. Certainly, this is the preferred way for CLTs to develop housing. They would rather have the subsidies come to them so they can do their work, remove the land and the housing from the speculative market. But community land trusts have found ways to also work with grant and loan programs that go to homeowners, to the home buyers. So, and it's not an either or. So local governments are giving direct grants and loans to the CLT to build the homes. They're also, either the local government or the State Housing Finance Agency are giving grants or loans to the home buyers. So you can mix and match these various sources of subsidy, various kinds of support. Now, the real value added for community land trust is, the stewardship over time, right? Protecting the affordability, the condition of the homes, preventing the displacement of the home buyer. But, there's still a general reluctance. 63% of the CLTs we talked to for this study said, we really don't get operating funds from our local government. We get project funds, we might get land from a local land bank, but we don't get operating funds. But, in another third, they are getting funds, particularly to subsidize the operations of the community land trust so they can then be an active steward of the homes. Community land trusts are covering the cost of stewardship in other ways as well, right? They're collecting lease fees, they're getting charitable donations, development fees as they develop the homes, transfer fees, that is when the homes sell and resell, most CLTs will collect a small fee just to manage the resale. And then the membership dues from a larger body of supporters for the community land trust. So these are not mutually exclusive, of course. Most CLTs will use multiple ways to fund their operations to take care of stewardship. All right, let's turn to the CLT side of the equation, and then we will open it up for questions and conversation. I want to talk about some of the things we saw going on with community land trust in the United States as we did the research, did the study. So first trend is what I call more diverse portfolios. Yeah, a majority of community land trust focus on homeownership, but they're doing a lot of other things as well. Here's a more simple way of looking at it. And these are not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, if 90% of the community land trust that we talked to or we surveyed are doing single family houses, townhouses, and duplexes, they may also be doing condos. It may also be doing office space. It might also be doing the arts. So this is not mutually exclusive in these categories. But I circled the multifamily lines here because there is a trend that we observed from 2008 report to the one that we did last year of an increasing number of community land trusts that are not just doing single family detached houses, townhouses, even duplexes. They're focused on multifamily housing, and they may be homeownership, they may be rentals. But then look at some of the other activities that they're involved in, that 40% of the CLTs in our survey are doing parks, gardens, urban ag. We've got an increasing number of community land trusts that are offering retail and office space, not just for themselves, but maybe for other essential businesses in the community. So we found a real diversification of the types of projects that CLTs are doing, even as they continue to focus on homeownership. Their portfolios are starting to grow, right? And the 115 community land trust in our sample, over 18,000, almost 18,300 units in this sample. And, 2/3 of them still have fewer than 100 units of housing in their portfolios. But you can see that we now have more community land trusts. They're building larger portfolios, including 9 community land trusts in the United States that now have portfolios of over 500 homes. There's a trend toward larger geographic areas that are being served by community land trust. You know, in the beginning of the community land trust movement, when I first got involved, every community land trust was serving one neighborhood or maybe one small town. Now, most community land trusts have a larger service area where they're going citywide, countywide, multi-county, and we have three statewide community land trust organizations. Now, I would say even within those larger service areas, most community land trusts still stake out one or two zones, neighborhoods, areas where they're putting most of their resources. They're doing neighborhood revitalization in one neighborhood, even as they're being opportunistic about buying, developing housing in a larger geography. A lot more diversification in the structure of the organizations themselves. In fact, we discovered that more than 10% of the community land trusts that were in our sample were either subsidiaries of larger organizations or there were internal programs of larger community development corporations, Habitat for Humanity affiliates, and the like. Now, when you've got multiple CLTs within the same area, and we have an increasing incidence of that, sometimes those community land trusts are not working well together. They're competing for the same resources, the same constituencies. But increasingly, when multiple community land trusts share the same state, same metropolitan area, sometimes the same city, then they're finding ways to cooperate and even to create their own coalitions, their own standing organizations that support the work of the local CLTs, even as they're doing lobbying, collecting funds for CLT development more widely. And these are some of the national, regional, statewide, and metro-wide coalitions now, where multiple community land trusts are working in concert to raise funds, to pool their waiting list, to lobby for political changes at their state or city level. Even though we're talking here about Virginia, we're talking about the United States, I'll at least also mention that there are now half a dozen coalitions that span national boundaries or regional boundaries around the world. There are about 320, 350 community land trusts in the United States, but there are an equal number outside the United States. And I think very soon the rate of CLT formation outside the United States is going to mean that there are more community land trusts in other countries than here at home. More community land trusts find themselves at the front end of recovering from natural disasters, whether it's hurricanes, wildfires, floods, where community land trusts, I think because of their long time horizon, the fact that they are the developer that doesn't go away, the fact that they provide stewardship for the homes and the homeowners, that they've had a hand in putting in place, that when natural disaster occurs, fires, wildfires, floods, the CLT is there to work with their constituents, with their communities, with their homeowners to help them to recover. And then at the other side, I think because of the long-term thinking of community land trust, we found an increasing number of them that are not just concerned about climate change, but they're preparing for it. They're doing things to anticipate, to do development in such a way that when natural disaster occurs, and disasters that are becoming more severe and more frequent because of climate change, that their homes and their homeowners will continue. And then throughout the CLT movement, if I can call it a movement, there has been for a long time a priority for racial equity, for realizing that Indigenous peoples, ethnic enclaves, people of color are folks who have been excluded disproportionately from access to the homeownership market. So we have an increasing number of community land trusts that have a priority for producing homes and for reaching populations that have been historically excluded from the opportunity to become homeowners. As Michelle mentioned, I'm on the board of the International Center for Community Land Trust. We give away most of our materials. I have my website, our website up there, but I thought I'd put a plug in for World CLT Day, which is happening next week. And we are a sponsor of World CLT Day, which is a celebration more than anything else, where community land trusts from around the world have an opportunity to upload videos, photographs, and to participate in any number of educational events that are being sponsored as part of World CLT Day. So it's a celebration of how far we've come. It's not very didactic. It's not haranguing people with you ought to do this and that. It's really a showcase for people to talk about their projects and their people, and it's a very low threshold for participation. So I would encourage all 5 of the CLTs in Virginia to Google World CLT Day and participate in the celebration that is happening on May 16th. It's quite fun to see your colleagues from around the world posting videos and photographs and celebrating their work. Okay, well, so I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I think we're going to open it up with Michelle as our fine facilitator and host to begin hearing your questions and having a conversation. So thank you for inviting me here today.
Yes, this is great. Thank you so much. That was excellent. I am going to get us started with a little bit of interaction. Can everybody see the map on the screen? That's awesome. Okay, so we have some questions that came in through the registration stage, and before I get to those, I want to give an opportunity, and if he has any, if they have any questions to some of the folks that we worked with to prepare this this event. So we've got folks. So Dan Lehman from the Community Foundation of the Blue Ridge, and we've got our folks from Virginia Housing who are on here. And so I want to give you guys an opportunity, if you do have any questions, to get us started. And if you do, help us find you by raising your hand or putting your videos on. And I think what we can also do is we can stop the focus mode so we can see everybody. Okay, so let's see. Dan, are you out there?
I am. I just couldn't find the button to raise my hand.
Ah, okay.
So,
Excellent. There you are.
John, I have a question for you about the piece of the CLT model that really keeps me interested in this, and that's that affordability and perpetuity component. And CLTs have now been around for 56 years, so there's been some time to test that notion of perpetuity, which can be a bit of an intangible for many people. Wonder, over that 56-year history of CLTs, have there been some challenges to that notion of perpetuity? And if so, how has the CLT model adapted?
That's a great question.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is that we are serving low and moderate income people, and they're often precarious in their personal lives. Things can happen and they can face foreclosure, or there may be deferred maintenance in the homes. So I would say, and with regard to perpetuity, we have a mechanism here that absolutely can preserve affordability over time, one resale after another. We have the ability to step in a foreclosure situation to keep the home from being lost to foreclosure, lost to the portfolio. I think what we have a harder time with are issues of deferred maintenance. And, what happens if someone really doesn't have the financial wherewithal to keep up their home? So then the CLT repurchases a home that's not in very good repair, right? So I think of the three phases of stewardship: affordability, upkeep of the buildings, foreclosure prevention. I think we've been really good at protecting affordability. I think CLTs have been really good at intervening in foreclosure situations. I think we're a little later to the game on the other face of stewardship, which is maintaining the quality of the homes in partnership with the homeowners. Some homeowners are just either they shouldn't have become homeowners in the first place, or they had a disruption in their personal lives that made it very difficult for them to keep the homes up in good repair, right? So that then the CLT repurchases a home on resale and they get a home that's in pretty poor shape. So I think we're getting better at that. I think more community land trusts are creating stewardship funds. I think more community land trusts are doing training of first-time home buyers, so they know what they're getting into. And they're building their resale formulas around worst case scenarios that, gee, if the home is in terrible repair when the CLT repurchases it and then has to sell it again, who pays the cost of bringing that house up to a high level of repair for the next home buyer? And I think CLTs have gotten much better at preparing for that, creating stewardship funds, training the homeowners, and shaping their resale formulas so in a true meltdown situation where they really get a terrible property, that they're then using some of the departing homeowners' equity to bring that house up to a high level of repair. Well, I don't know, we could talk we could talk a lot about this one, but it really comes down to stewardship, and stewardship is affordability, it's the condition, and it's foreclosure prevention. You have to do all three. And I would
Thank
say
you, John.
we have been very, very successful as a movement, if I can characterize CLTs as that. And I think with well over 300 CLTs now in the United States and equal number outside, I think we can say it's a movement with a small m. But I think we have done very, very well in preserving affordability, preventing foreclosures, and I think increasingly we've done pretty well at the upkeep, protecting the condition of the assets themselves.
Thanks.
Thank you. So our next question is one that came in from online, and I'm going to invite Vaughn Poehler, who is out there somewhere, to join us on screen. There you are. Hi, Vaughn.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you. So the question I had was, are there indicators within the local housing stock that would cause you to recommend a CLT? Is there some way of looking at what's going on in your market that says, maybe we should be thinking about a CLT in our community right now?
Yeah, For years, people believed that the only application of a community land trust was in hot markets, right? We need to step in to preserve affordability where lower priced homes are disappearing, right? In gentrifying neighborhoods, how do we preserve a certain percentage of the housing stock for low and moderate income people in the face of gentrification, hot market situations, right? I would say over the last 50 years, we probably have almost as many community land trusts that have started in cold markets as in hot markets, either because they're trying to get in early before the market turns and becomes hot, or because they are looking at the other two aspects of stewardship. They're looking at the upkeep of the buildings and foreclosure prevention, even if protecting affordability is not as much of a concern because it's a cold market. I would say that there are also many community land trusts that have started in cold markets, and within 10 years, they found themselves in a hot market, right? So the market can change pretty rapidly, one way or the other. So I try to emphasize that stewardship has three faces and not just one. It's not just about preserving affordability. It's also about preserving the condition of the built environment. And it's also about protecting, backstopping security of tenure for the low and moderate income people we've boosted in to that homeownership situation. So if you think of the three faces of stewardship, then you have different priorities depending on your market. Hot markets, maybe affordability is your primary concern. Cold markets, well, maybe the upkeep is the primary concern. So so anyway, I think it can work in cold markets, it can work in hot markets. Started out in hot markets, now it's being applied in many, a very real diversity, because these markets can change so rapidly, right? They can go up, they can go down.
Thank you.
I kind of think of what we're doing as counter-cyclical stewardship. Yeah, when the markets are really, really hot, and we're doing affordable housing in those markets, well, what is our forte? It's preserving affordable housing. When markets are cold and there's disinvestment and deferred maintenance, well, our forte is keeping the quality of the buildings up, right? So that's why I try to emphasize that stewardship has three faces, not just one. It's not just about preserving affordability.
Excellent. Okay, so we have several questions that are coming in the chat, and let's see what we can go with. So one came in that says, it seems like most jurisdictions focus on down payment and closing cost assistance with their homeownership resources. Are there certain local conditions or types of land ownership that have led local governments to the CLT model? So we've talked about some local conditions, but what can you tell us about things that have maybe transitioned groups from doing down payment and closing cost assistance to see it work with CLTs?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that those existing programs of down payment assistance, subsidized low interest loans can work with a CLT. You can combine it, right? You can take public subsidies or land that was owned in the public domain, and you can move that land into the CLT's portfolio. You can use all of the resources, all the subsidies that come from local, county, state government to build affordable housing. And you can make use of all the subsidies that are available to low income, moderate income home buyers. So most CLTs don't just use one of these sources. They're combining them, they're mixing them together because the more you've worked down the income ladder, the lower the income of the people you're trying to boost into homeownership, the more likely it is you're going to have to use a mix of subsidies. You're gonna have to move some land into the portfolio. You're gonna have to give a low interest loan to the CLT to build the homes. You're gonna give down payment assistance to the home buyer. So, again, it depends on where you're working on that income ladder, but the poorer the home buyer, the more you have to look at this whole mix of subsidies. Does that address that question?
I think it does, and I think that we can tie in another question that came in, which was about a particular form of assistance. So somebody is interested in finding out what are some examples of where localities provide loans to home buyers that are structured as soft second mortgages. And so I guess that could be the locality or the state. How do these soft second mortgages interact with CLTs?
Well, I'd say there are many CLTs that are using that particular mechanism. Our preference within the world of CLTs, of course, are going to be that the homeowner that has been subsidized does not pocket the subsidy when they leave the home. So ideally, if you are going to give a deferred interest loan to a CLT home buyer, if that home buyer then resells 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road to another income eligible family, you would like that subsidy to be able to transfer from one home buyer to another. But I would say community land trusts have found a way to do workarounds with every existing grant or loan source that's been made available by a local government, by a housing trust fund, by a state housing finance agency. They found some way to make it work. There's in our report itself, we have a discussion of good money, bad money, where there are kinds of subsidies to the community land trust that are most useful and that make the model work the best. And there are others that are it takes a little workaround to really utilize those. But I don't think community land trusts are turning up their nose at any available money, any way of assisting low-income people and boosting them into home ownership. And it's really a mix, right? It's not a either or here. In Burlington, Vermont, where I live and where the community land trust have been supported by local government since 1984, our local government has conveyed surplus property, made available land for development, provided development grants, development loans, home buyer assistance to the low-income people buying our homes. So, we've worked hand in glove with our state housing finance agency so that our home buyers here in Burlington at the Champlain Housing Trust can take advantage of those mortgage opportunities. So there's no one right way to do it. There are preferred ways. I think there are best practices that we try to address in our report. But, I'd say community land trusts are the junkyard dogs here in the housing world, where they will make use of every scrap that's available. But once we figure out how to build the housing, once we figure out how to boost low and moderate income people into home ownership, the real value added of the model is perpetuating the affordability of those homes, locking the subsidy in place so it recycles in place in those homes, and standing behind the low moderate income home buyers. So if there is a foreclosure situation, the land trust is there as a partner, hopefully to prevent the foreclosure, slow it down, help to make the homeowner hang on to the home, make the home buyer, homeowner whole. But in a worst case scenario, buy out the homeowner and still keep that home within the land trust portfolio to make it available to another low moderate income home buyer.
Okay, great. I'm going to move on to a couple more questions where they're starting to come in. So how people are asking about the ground lease fee. How does it work? How is it annual or monthly? How is it assessed? And I know how you're going to answer this, and so I'll follow up with how we do it. But you go ahead
No,
and
that's
how do
exactly,
most do
that's
it?
exactly what I was going to do. I was going to defer to you. I think it'd be presumptuous of me to say how it is done or should be done in Virginia. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Michelle.
Yes, so from what I understand, it's done in a variety of different ways. The way that we do it is we have an annual ground lease fee of $100. And we offer our homeowners the ability to pay that quarterly or annually. I think it's simpler for everybody to just have one annual payment. I have heard of others that the dollar amount is a little higher, whether it's a $25 a month or $100 a month, something like that. Our board at our setup stage decided to keep that number as low as feasible, but to keep that connection between the owners and the CLT, so that there was a regular interaction, whether or not they reached out to us in any other way. We were always connected to them through that tool. So, yeah. So that's that answer. For us, again, it's going to be different for every CLT.
Yeah, there is no kind of CLT police that's going to come in there and say, oh, your lease fee is much too low. You really have to bump it up, or your lease fee is much too high. So I think part of the strength of the model is its flexibility, right? It's like every community, every state takes this basic template, this basic model, and reworks it, fashions it to its own circumstances, its own priorities, its own politics. Now,
Exactly.
I would agree with you that even if you are charging a minimal lease fee for the use of the land, it's still important to keep it in place. I mean, it may, $30 a month may seem trivial, but in our experience in the CLT world, when a homeowner gets in trouble, for whatever reason, gets in financial trouble, the first thing they stop paying is their lease fee.
Mm.
Yeah? So that becomes like the canary in the coal mine. That tells the CLT, hey, maybe there's something going on there. Maybe we ought to give them a call or pay them a visit and say, hey, are things okay? So it really is it's a trigger, an alert fashion, even if it's not a big stream of income.
Mhm. That's an excellent point. I'm going to move to the next topic. So there are a few different questions about income levels and affordability. So one is, what is affordability to a CLT? Does that mean decreasing the home cost or the monthly payment? What metrics define affordability? And does it change from CLT to CLT? And then similarly, another person had asked whether CLTs get involved in what's typically called workforce housing. So, different income levels. So can you talk about what you see in your survey? And I could maybe follow up with some comments on us.
Well, okay. Let's take them one at a time. Which question would you like me to address first?
So what is affordability to a CLT? How do they define affordability?
Well, most CLTs kind of back in to that. They decide who is the population they want to serve, right? I mean, are you going to, do you want to serve, take the workforce question. Are you trying to serve people at 120% of AMI? Because that is the workforce that is being priced out of your market for homeownership. And if so, you kind of work backwards from there, to defining affordability of what can a household at 120% of AMI afford. I mean, across the country, there is such a range of, community land trusts that serve people, households. I would say maybe 45% may be the low end and 120% may be the high end. So there's a real range, you kind of start with, and even setting your resale formula and looking for subsidies. Who are we trying to serve? Who are going to be the beneficiaries of our program? And then you back into, all right, well, what is going to be affordable for that population? You know, so, that's a pretty key decision when you're starting up. Now, I will say that some CLTs start a little higher. Like they say, we're going to serve people at 120% of AMI. And then over time, because those households become more affordable as they're sold, resold, repurchased by the CLT, they're able to serve a population a little lower down the income ladder. So it can
Because
change.
the tool is that effective that it actually increases affordability over time.
Well, it does. You reached further down the income ladder if you,
Wow.
depending on your resale formula, of course, but most resale formulas are designed to not only keep the housing affordable, but to kind of work contrary in a counter-cyclical way with the market, right? So that these homes become more affordable relative to what's going on in the market and even what's going on with the change in household income. So I'm
Great.
afraid it's kind of a wishy-washy answer because one of the
Yep.
first things that every CLT has to do is decide who are your beneficiaries, and you work
Right.
backwards from that.
So I'll just follow up with, specific to VSCLT. We have provisions in our standard ground lease that say that essentially the maximum is 115% of AMI, and there's a fallback that allows up to 120% of AMI. But those are those kind of provisions in the ground lease for maximums. When we have been creating homeowners, with the ground lease, with the CLT model, we have tended to focus on lower income home buyers, and that is in large part because of our initial partners being Habitat for Humanity organizations. So we've been very focused on serving the homeowners that are serviced and served by Habitat for Humanity organizations. And I would say, depending on what kind of market that those Habitat for Humanity organizations are in, they each also, target different levels of income. If they're in a high income area, then the folks who are earning 60% and below, that level of income may actually be high enough to produce a large number of potential home buyers who just can't afford the market. If we're working with other communities in a very low income rural area, for instance, which in some recent conversations we've been having in Southwest Southern Virginia, their AMI is so low that the area median income is so low that it makes more sense to raise the AMI or the target median income, that you're looking at the 80 to 100 or maybe higher, simply because that's the level of income that it actually takes to afford homes in that area. So some of that is the vagaries of how our AMI is determined. And so it may or may not be the best measure, but it's so when we work in local communities, we work with our partners. So I had a diagram that showed that we pull together partners that are what we call mission partners and developer partners, and then the VSCLT, and we work together to come up with what is the sort of the target level of income that we want to serve. And we don't prescribe that when we're coming in and working with a community. It's part of our statewide approach, is that we flex our model to be appropriate to those partners that we're working with in each locality. So let's see.
Since you mentioned Habitat, let me say that one of the most fruitful partnerships that is happening around the country are partnerships between Community Land Trust and Habitat for Humanity affiliates. Sometimes it's the Habitat affiliate that starts a Community Land Trust, either as an internal program or as a spinoff, or it's a Habitat for Humanity affiliate that is partnering with a local community land trust. We've done that here in Burlington. It's happening around the country. In 2017, Habitat for Humanity International published a shelter report called Affordable for Good. And you're not going to be able to, maybe you can see this on the screen. Looks like
Oh,
that.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and basically this publication blessed the whole idea of resale, restricted, owner-occupied housing and community land trusts. So it was kind of a ringing endorsement. And now you look around the country and there are probably 50 places where you can say, here is a partnership between a local Habitat for Humanity affiliate and a local community land trust, or a Habitat affiliate doing a community land trust. So it's been a really important partnership. And they both emerged from Koinonia Farm, so it's appropriate that they work together.
Yes, great. Okay, so I have a couple more questions. I have one here from Dan Lehman. He says, you mentioned that there are some CLTs that exist for a specific neighborhood, and we know that there are statewide CLTs, such as VSCLT. What are the advantages of a CLT that serves a larger region and an entire state? And I guess one way that you might address that is one of the trends that you talked about is that their CLTs are growing in their coverage areas. So what's leading them to that? And that would kind of imply that there's an advantage. So how have you seen that work?
Well, the advantage, it's opportunist, right? I mean, the larger your service area, the more municipal governments within your service area, the more opportunities you have to find buildable sites. You have more opportunities you have to recruit local government support for your operations. And you have a higher profile, right? Your footprint is bigger. And so more things come to you. And so there is a trend to going to a larger area. The disadvantage, or at least let's say the thing that community land trust with larger geographies really have to pay attention to is the C in CLT. I mean, who is your community if you're serving a metro area with several million people? Yeah. You keep that engagement, that involvement of your homeowners and of the neighborhoods that you're serving. So that becomes a challenge. There's a challenge here in Burlington. Our service area is 3 counties now. We started out in 1984 in one neighborhood, and then we went citywide, countywide, and now the Champlain Housing Trust serves 3 counties.
Mhm.
We have a membership of 8,000 people now are members of the Champlain Housing Trust. So it makes for a really large, exciting membership meeting once a year, but keeping people engaged in a larger geography with a lot of different geographic parochial interest can be challenging and sometimes get lost. I mean, I'll say that there are community land trusts that as they grew their territory, the C in CLT went from a capital C to a lowercase c. So the community element started to become diluted. So you have to pay really, really close attention to that aspect, because the community land trust, you have to wear 2 hats at the same time. You have to have your development stewardship hat on, and you have to have your community hat on, because this is a model that works best when the people buying the homes are engaged in the organization in some fashion. When the communities, a larger geography served by the community land trust, are engaged in some fashion. So, and that's a challenge with a bigger service area. As a developer, it's a great thing. As a community developer, it has its challenges.
Well, there's another question that ties directly into that. So one question is, what kind of community coalitions have been successful in increasing the inventory of homes through CLTs? I'm sure you've got some great stories that you can tell us.
Oh, dare.
Pick one.
Yeah, it's sometimes community land trusts start out of those kind of coalitions, right? Other times they start with a single seed. You got a small steering committee, and they will come to me or to my colleague, Heather Benham, who I believe is on the call here today. And they'll say, geez, how do we build a base of support for our CLT? And we say, well, it can't just be your closest neighbors and friends. You got to build a base. You got to build a community for your land trust. So they start with a steering committee, and then they start attracting more and more people and get bigger and bigger so that they have more engagement, right? There are other places where the CLT has emerged not out of that kernel of activism that then spreads out like tossing a pebble into a pond, but it really starts because you've got a coalition of organizations. You've got a Habitat for Humanity affiliate. You've got a local community action agency. You've got some churches that have come together and said, we've got to figure out what to do to house our congregations, our constituents. And, different places have happened in different ways. Sometimes it's a coalition that creates the CLT. Sometimes it's a small group of people that get bigger and bigger. But it can't just be a club. I mean, sooner or later, you've got to build that base of support.
Okay. We have a lot of questions. I'm just gonna go into rapid fire round.
Rapid fire. All right. I'll try to keep my answers a lot shorter.
No, it's okay. It's okay. And to people who have asked questions, if they don't get answered, I'm gonna do my best to follow up with everybody to get answers. Next question from Don Scott at the state DHCD. How would a CLT model work with a housing developer that is awarded state grant funds for the construction of homes?
Well, I think it works best with a turnkey approach, right? Where the developer and the CLT sign an agreement that when the homes have been built, they will then be marketed and sold through the CLT. Those kind of partnerships are pretty powerful because each party does what that party does best. The developer, it does best what the builder. The finance agency does best, they're the funder. The CLT does best, they're the steward. So those kind of partnerships have happened in many places, and they're quite powerful.
And I mentioned in our intro that we are not the developer. We partner with other developers. And that was another question that came through. Are CLTs developers or not developers? And the answer is yes and. Right?
Every CLT is a steward. Not every CLT is a developer.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
that's the shorthand. I mean, we really, the forte, the value added is what we bring to the deal after you figure out how to build the houses, how to move the land into the land trust portfolio, how to put low and moderate income people into the homes. When you figured out that, which is a challenge for everybody that's trying to do affordable housing, what the CLT's value added is what happens next.
Exactly.
It's the stewardship.
Okay, next rapid fire round of questions is about condos and co-ops and HOAs. You mentioned another trend that there's more multi-unit, multifamily housing. So tell us, how does that work?
Well, it works in a lot of different ways. In some cases, it's the land trust is doing a master lease to the co-op or to the condo association. You still have the co-op organized as a co-op on leased land. You still have the condo association, the HOA on leased land. It's I think the strength of this model is this sheer flexibility. Anything you can do on land, anything you can do with land has been done somewhere with a community land trust. And community land trusts are wonderfully generous in sharing their experiences, good and bad. So I would say, there is a trend toward multifamily housing located on land trust land, primarily because the land is so costly. You want to build as much density on that land as you can in an urban area. So the only way you can do that is a condo or a co-op.
And so another question then is, does it always have to be a ground lease model? I understand that there's some financing challenges when you have condominiums, and that the lenders, and we haven't even talked about lenders today. Lenders have really figured out CLTs, and there's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Virginia Housing. Again, there are well-developed financial tools to get mortgages to CLT home buyers. That could be a whole other webinar that maybe we'll do one day. But when it comes to condominiums, from what I understand, and we'll be doing one soon, the situation is often legally set up slightly differently with deed restrictions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in some cases, the community land trust will own the land under the entire project. Yeah, and then we'll do affordability covenants. We'll master lease the land to the condo association, yeah, and then do individual deed covenants attached to the units for the condominiums. There are situations, of course, where community land trusts don't own the land. They didn't develop a 50-unit condo project. Instead, perhaps there's an inclusionary zoning requirement that 10% of those 50 units have to be affordable, and the CLT becomes the steward of those 5 units. In that case, the land trust does not own the land, but what they will hold will be the covenant, will be the affordability covenant on the 5, the 10 condo units that are in their portfolio.
Mm-hmm. And I've even heard, and we haven't done this yet, but I've heard of other situations where there's what's called a buyer-driven model, where the buyer will go out and find a condominium and then work with the CLT to obtain resources to bring that condominium into the CLT.
Yeah, there are a lot of community land trusts with buyer-initiated programs where they set the underwriting criteria. They say, look, go out and find a house or a condominium that meets this profile. And when it does, we will either buy the land under the single family house, or we are going to give you down payment assistance to help you buy that condominium in exchange for an affordability covenant attached to the unit deed. So yeah, those are, and CLTs, like in Burlington, we do development on vacant land. We buy existing buildings and rehab them and resell them or condominiumize them. We do rental housing. We do shelters. So it's not an either or. I mean, the community land trusts are really diversifying their portfolios around the country.
Mm-hmm. And the last question, and everybody's going to love this. We're gonna have our last question be on everybody's favorite topic: taxes. So this was actually a question that came in ahead of time, and the question is, what is the relationship between CLT and the Commissioner of Revenue in a locality? And another way to think about that is, how does taxation work? And I'll give you a heads up that Virginia has a special rule. So talk to us about taxes.
I'm going to talk about what the ideal is, as opposed to saying what I believe is happening in Virginia. And the ideal from the point of view of the Community Land Trust is that the land is going to be taxed, is going to be valued and taxed on the basis of the stream of income that the Community Land Trust is collecting from the land to lease it to the home buyer. Yeah. And in most CLTs, that stream of revenue is pretty low, right? You're not collecting a market rate rent in leasing the land. So the ideal from the point of view of the CLT is, look, use the income approach in valuing the land that we own, because the only income we're getting off it are our lease fees, and our lease fees are set at a below market rate. Yeah. For the building, what CLTs lobby for, beg for, try for, is to convince the local assessor that the true value of that home is its resale price subject to the CLT's resale formula that's embedded in the ground lease. So instead of taxing the home at its highest and best market value that the homeowner will never realize, will never pocket, CLTs are asking their local assessor, look, the true market value of this house is its resale value over the next 99 years as restricted by our ground lease. So you want to tax the land based on the revenue on the lease fees. You want to tax the buildings based on the resale formula. Now, I will say, state by state, sometimes assessor by assessor within the same state, this is an argument, a negotiation that CLTs have to undergo, right? And
So,
to be honest, I don't know what the situation is in your state.
well, I can share.
Please.
So in Virginia, we do have a state law that requires the local assessors to assess the properties based on their affordable resale value. And so, but you know, anytime there's a state law, doesn't mean that the local assessors understand it. And so this is an example where all the CLTs in Virginia work together with an attorney to prepare materials that we send to the local assessors in the communities where we work that tells them about this law and how to implement it. And that has been successful for us. And they do take slightly different approaches to how they do it, but that is part of what we do when we work in a community is we work with the assessor to make sure that the taxation meets this state law and makes sense.
Yeah, in
So-
some states, it really is going to be regulated by a law that gets
Yes.
passed. In some states, it's merely an advisory that comes from the State Department of Taxation. In a lot of places, even if you've got a state law in place that says to the local assessors, you must value these resale restricted homes based on the cap, on the resale cap. Even in those states, it often is a county by county, town by town negotiation.
Yes. Well, on that, I see that somebody's asked for that state law number. I'll provide that in the follow-up materials, definitely. I want to thank you, John, for joining us and sharing your wealth of expertise about community wealth. We're just so happy that you were able to join us. This publication is amazing. For everybody who is on here, just as I mentioned in the beginning, but we have a recording of this and we have the slides. We will be making them available to everybody. In addition to as much as we can, information on getting answers to the questions people have asked that we didn't get to answer. I am going to be putting something up on our website. I'll send out a link to everybody with some follow-up for this. That has, you know, those links and other things, such as links to John's other publications. I, you know, welcome and invite anybody who is interested to reach out to us. I'll provide my email address in the follow-up to everybody. And feel free to follow up with me and we can have some conversations about how we can work together. So thank you again. I appreciate your time and your expertise, and I'm sure everybody else here does too.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Goodbye, everybody.